Everything on the front of a package is advertising. Not description, not information. Advertising. The words were chosen by a marketing department, tested on focus groups, and cleared by lawyers whose job was to find the line and stand exactly on it. The back of the package is different. The ingredients list and the nutrition panel are regulated, standardized, and enforceable. That's the honest part. Today we're going through 10 tricks that live on the front. All of them are legal. Most of them are not even controversial inside the industry. They're just standard practice that nobody explains to the person buying the food. I want to be clear about the framing, because this isn't a video about villains. Nobody in this industry is breaking the law. What's happening is that a set of rules was written decades ago, and companies have spent every year since learning exactly where those rules stop. That's what you're actually looking at in a supermarket. Not lies. Carefully engineered impressions, built in the space the rules left open. Number one at the end is the one that changes how you read every label for the rest of your life, and it takes about 4 seconds to apply. Everything before it is a specific technique. Number one is the structure underneath all of them. Let's get into it. You open a bag of chips, and it's a third full. You open a box of crackers, and there's a sleeve rattling around inside it. That gap has a name in the industry. It's called slack fill. Some of it is genuinely functional. Chips need cushioning air or they arrive as crumbs. Products settle in transit, so a box pack full at the factory looks half empty by the time you see it. But there's a category the law calls non-functional slack fill, which is empty space that serves no purpose except making the package look bigger. That one is not allowed, and companies get sued over it regularly. A serial slack fill case was working through the courts as recently as this year. The reason it keeps happening is that a taller box occupies more shelf space and reads as better value at a glance. You're not comparing volumes in your head while you shop. You're comparing silhouettes. The fix costs you nothing. Every package has a net weight printed on it, usually small, usually near the bottom. That number is regulated and it cannot lie. The box size can. There's a second version of this that's harder to spot, where the package doesn't have air in it so much as shape. Deep indents in the base of a jar, thick shoulders on a bottle, a wide flat tub that holds less than a narrow tall one. All of it reads as volume from 3 feet away in a shop. The habit worth building is to stop buying by the look of the package entirely and start buying by the number. It feels tedious for about a week and then becomes automatic, and after that the shelf stops working on you. This phrase is on gummy snacks, cereal bars, yogurt tubes, juice drinks, anything aimed at a parent trying to do the right thing. And it is completely unregulated. There is no minimum amount of fruit required to say it. So a product can contain a trace of fruit concentrate and legally carry the claim in large friendly letters, next to a photograph of whole strawberries with the leaves still on. It gets better. The fruit in the product often isn't the fruit on the front. A package showing berries can be sweetened with apple or pear concentrate, because those are cheap, neutral tasting, and count as fruit. There's a documented version of this with vegetables too. A snack marketed as made with real vegetables listed its vegetable content as spinach and tomato powders, 10th and 11th on the ingredients list, while below the oil and the salt. The ingredients list settles it in about 2 seconds. Ingredients are ordered by weight. If the fruit is near the end, there's almost none in there. The related phrase to watch is fruit flavored, which is doing something different and is at least honest about it. Fruit flavored means the taste, not the fruit. Made with real fruit implies substance. Fruit flavored implies taste. The second one is the more truthful label, and it sells worse, which tells you everything about why the first one exists. This category matters more than most because it targets a specific decision. A parent standing in an aisle choosing between 2 snacks for a child, wanting the better one, with about 6 seconds to decide. That's the exact moment the phrase was written for. Most people read natural as meaning minimally processed, close to how it grew, nothing strange added. That is not what it means, because it doesn't really mean anything. The FDA has never established a formal definition for natural on food packaging. There's a long-standing informal position that it means nothing artificial or synthetic was added, and that's roughly where it sits, which leaves enormous room. A product labeled natural can be heavily processed, loaded with added sugar, and full of preservatives and flavorings, as long as those came from something that grew somewhere. Worth separating this from organic, which is a completely different situation. Organic is a certified USDA program with inspections and enforcement behind it. You may or may not think it's worth the money, but it is a real standard. Natural is not. So when both words appear on the same shelf at different prices, only one of them is backed by anything. There's a companion phrase hiding in the ingredients list, and it's stranger than the one on the front. Natural flavors is a legitimate regulatory category, but a single entry can represent dozens of separate compounds, some of them produced in a laboratory from a natural starting material. It's a genuine classification, not a trick, but it does not mean what most people picture. The useful way to hold all of this: natural describes where a molecule came from, not what it does to you or how processed the food around it is. Those are different questions, and only one of them is on the box. Here's a genuinely strange gap. The FDA does define sugar-free, reduced sugar, and no added sugar. Those have numbers attached, and companies have to meet them. But lightly sweetened, slightly sweet, and a dozen similar phrases have essentially no standard behind them. A company can decide what lightly means. The published examples are stark. A cereal marketed as lightly sweetened was measured at around 14 grams of added sugar per cup. An iced tea calling itself slightly sweet came in around 16 grams in a 12-ounce bottle. For context, that single bottle is most of a day's recommended added sugar for many adults, sold under a phrase engineered to suggest restraint. The added sugars line on the nutrition panel is the answer here, and it's been mandatory since the label redesign. Front says lightly, back says grams. Believe the grams. It helps to have one number in your head to measure against. The commonly cited guidance is around 25 grams of added sugar a day for women and 36 for men. Hold any lightly sweetened product up against that, and the phrase usually collapses on contact. And notice what these unregulated phrases have in common. They're all comparative words with nothing to compare to. Lightly, slightly less, reduced. Reduced actually has a definition, 25% less than the original. Lightly has nothing. The two words sit next to each other on a shelf, looking equally official. Made with whole grain. Excellent source of fiber. Supports immunity. Contains antioxidants. These phrases do different amounts of work, and some do none at all. Made with whole grain means whole grain is in there somewhere. It doesn't mean mostly or even meaningfully. A cookie can be made with whole grain. Excellent source of fiber is a defined claim with a real threshold, but it doesn't say anything about the rest of the product. A sugary cereal with added fiber earns it honestly and is still a sugary cereal. And supports immunity belongs to a category of vague wellness language that is deliberately unfalsifiable. It sounds like a medical claim while being carefully constructed not to be one, because a real medical claim would require real evidence. The pattern to notice: a strong claim about one ingredient is often there to distract from the whole. Nobody advertises the fiber unless there's something else they'd rather you not weigh. The purest form of this is a true claim that means nothing. Gluten-free on a bag of rice. No cholesterol on peanut butter, which never had any. Fat-free on a product made almost entirely of sugar. Every one of those is accurate, and every one is there to make you feel you've chosen carefully. Fortified and enriched belong here too, and they're worth understanding rather than dismissing. Enriched usually means nutrients were stripped out during processing and some are added back. That's not a scandal. It's a real public health measure with a real history. But it does describe a food that was processed heavily enough to need it. This one is regulated, which makes it trickier because it's true and misleading at the same time. No added sugar means exactly what it says. No sugar was added during production. It does not mean low sugar. Fruit and dairy contain plenty of their own, and that sugar hits your body the same way. A glass of fruit juice with no added sugar can carry as much sugar as a soft drink. The label is accurate. The impression is not. There's a further wrinkle worth knowing. Fruit juice concentrate can be used as a sweetener, while the product still claims no added sugar in some presentations, because it's technically fruit rather than sugar. It behaves like sugar in every way that matters to you. Total sugars on the panel is the honest number. Added sugars tells you what the manufacturer put in. Both are printed. Only one is advertised. Unsweetened is the phrase people confuse this with, and it's the more useful of the two. Unsweetened means nothing sweet was added at all. No added sugar can still allow sweetening through certain fruit-derived ingredients, depending on how the product is presented. If you want the plainer product, unsweetened is the word to look for. And a fair note in the other direction, because this isn't all bad faith. Whole fruit is genuinely different from juice. The fiber changes how fast the sugar arrives, and the volume changes how much you'd actually eat. An apple and a glass of apple juice are not the same event in your body, even though the sugar line looks similar. Prices are watched closely. People notice when something goes from $4 to $5. They notice far less when the package quietly goes from 16 ounces to 14 and the price stays where it was. That's shrinkflation, and it accelerated sharply through the recent inflationary period. Same shelf, same branding, same price, less product. It's legal as long as the net weight on the package is accurate, which it is. What makes it effective is that the packaging usually doesn't change shape. Sometimes the walls get slightly thicker or the base gets a deeper indent, so the silhouette on the shelf looks identical to what you bought last year. The defense is the unit price, that small tag on the shelf edge showing cost per ounce or per 100 grams. It's printed for exactly this reason, and almost nobody reads it. Unit price is also the only reliable way to compare two competing brands in different size packages, which is a problem you face on every aisle. One warning about unit price, because it isn't foolproof. Different products sometimes use different units on the same shelf, one price per ounce and the next per 100 count, which makes them impossible to compare at a glance. When that happens, it's usually not deliberate, but the effect is the same and you have to do the arithmetic yourself. There's also a quieter cousin of shrinkflation worth naming. The recipe changes instead of the size. A cheaper oil replaces a more expensive one. The cocoa percentage drops. The meat content in a ready meal falls a few points. The weight is identical. The price is identical. And the only place it shows is the ingredients list you never compare against last year's. Ingredients are listed in order of weight, heaviest first. That rule is the most useful thing on any package, and there's a well-known way around it. If sugar would be the first ingredient, that looks bad. So instead of one sweetener, the product uses several. Cane sugar, honey, brown rice syrup, fruit juice concentrate, dextrose. Each one is individually lighter than the flour, so each lands further down the list. Sugar never appears at the top, even though sugar in total might be the largest single component. The same technique works with fats and with salt. It's not fraud, because every ingredient is disclosed and the ordering rule is followed exactly as written. It's just an ordering rule being used against the purpose it exists for. Once you know it, you can see it. Scan for how many sweeteners appear anywhere in the list. 3 or 4 different ones spread through the middle usually means the total is high. The list of names is longer than people expect, which is what makes the technique work. Sucrose, dextrose, maltose, fructose, molasses, malt syrup, agave nectar, evaporated cane juice, fruit juice concentrate. Some of these sound wholesome, and a couple sound like chemistry. Your body handles them in broadly the same way. The same splitting logic shows up with flour. A bread can list whole wheat flour first, and then enriched wheat flour, refined flour, and a few starches further down, and end up mostly refined despite what the front panel says about whole grain. A rough shortcut that holds up well. If the ingredients list is long and you recognize fewer than half the entries as things you could buy separately, you're holding a heavily formulated product. That's not automatically bad, but it's worth knowing which category you're in. Every number on the nutrition panel depends on one number at the top, and that number is set by the manufacturer within loose guidance. A bottle that any normal person drinks in one sitting can be labeled as 2.5 servings. A bag of chips nobody has ever split can be 4. The calories, the sugar, the sodium, all of it gets divided by a number chosen to make the panel look calm. The rules were tightened a few years ago so that single-serving containers have to be labeled as 1 serving, which helped. But plenty of products sit in the gap and use it. This is why 2 products can look similar on the panel and be wildly different in practice. You're not comparing foods, you're comparing 2 different arbitrary portions. Check servings per container first before you read a single other number. If it says 2, everything below it is half of what you're about to eat. Some products now carry dual column labels, showing both per serving and per container. Those exist because regulators recognize the problem, and where you see one, the manufacturer has effectively been forced to show you the honest number. It's worth noticing which products volunteer that and which don't. The reason this sits at number 2 is that it silently multiplies every other trick on the list. A product can look moderate on sugar, moderate on sodium, moderate on calories, purely because the portion was defined small. Fix the serving size in your head, and half the panel reorganizes itself. There's a simple test that cuts through it. Ask what you would actually eat in one sitting, not what the label proposes. Then scale the numbers to that. It's arithmetic you can do standing up, and it's the single most clarifying thing on the back of a package. The reaction most people have to a list like this is that surely some of it must be against the rules. Almost none of it is. Every technique here is standard, disclosed, and defensible in court, which is precisely why it's so widespread. That isn't a scandal so much as a design. The front of the package is a legally protected advertising space, and advertising is allowed to be enthusiastic. The regulated content was moved somewhere specific, and the somewhere is the back, which gives you a rule that's almost insultingly simple, and it's the only thing I'd want you to keep from this video. Treat the front of the package as an ad, not as a source of information that might be exaggerated. As an ad, then read 3 things on the back. Servings per container, so you know what the numbers refer to. The first 3 ingredients, because that's most of what you're holding. And added sugars, because that's the number companies work hardest to obscure. 4 seconds, 3 numbers. That's the whole defense, and it works on every product in the store regardless of what the front says. The reason this matters more than any individual trick is that the tricks change. New phrases get invented as old ones lose their power. But the structure doesn't change. Front is marketing, back is regulated, and that stays true no matter what they put on the box next year. So that's the list. 10 techniques that are all perfectly legal and all working on you every time you shop. If you want the short version, ignore the front, check servings per container, read the first 3 ingredients, and look at added sugars. None of this requires you to eat differently or spend more. Most of it just makes you harder to sell to, which is a different thing from being healthier and honestly more useful. I'd like to know which one of these you'd already spotted on your own. My guess is the empty bag of chips, because everyone has had that moment, but I'm curious whether the sugar splitting one was new. If this was useful, subscribing helps a channel this size more than you'd think. There's a new one almost every day, all in the same spirit. Real information, no scaring you in either direction. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.